colleagues for being here. I'm the ranking Republican on the Homeland Security Committee with oversight over the Department of Homeland Security. We are facing the worst crisis on our southern border that we've had in at least 2 decades. And it's entirely due to changes in policy from the Biden administration. That's a fact. In particular, because this is about Title 42, they chose to get rid of Title 42 as it related to all children, all unaccompanied children, many families, now most families, and yet they did nothing to prepare for the obvious influx that was going to occur, particularly because they had changed the asylum policy to make it more generous. So it was not only that they revoked Title 42, which at that time particularly, COVID was still raging, not just in America, but even more so south of the border. But they did so without preparing for what they knew was going to happen. That's the height of irresponsibility. Now, sadly, they're talking about doing it again. And this time it'll be with regard to adults. Again, I will just say today, and I'm sure my colleagues have said this, be prepared. They cannot say this time that they don't know there's going to be an influx, because there's obviously going to be an influx. Because many of these adults are now being turned away because of Title 42 and the health care emergency. That will be gone. And yet are they doing anything to prepare? Remember, having been down on the border, when the children started coming across, they were stuck into detention facilities run by the Border Patrol that they were only allowed to be in for 72 hours, and many were in there for weeks. And they were living during the COVID period with no COVID testing, inches apart, on the floor, living on mats. Then they went to HHS facilities, which were overcrowded, not prepared for them. There were obviously allegations of abuse that you heard about. Then they were pushed out to families as quickly as they could be, meaning that the sponsors were not properly vetted, which is something I've studied twice now in 2 different reports out of our subcommittee on investigations, with a bipartisan report saying this must stop. There has to be proper vetting of these sponsors. So these are the consequences of a border policy and an immigration policy that is irresponsible. Now look, they have a right to change the asylum policy and to make other changes, but they don't have the right to tell people in Latin America, and I just got back from Ecuador and Guatemala, 2 of the countries that are sending some of the large numbers of kids and families and even adults now across. The presidents of those countries said the same thing. We don't want our people to go. We want our young people to stay and be part of the future of this country. Why are you in America creating a pull factor? Forget the push factor for a minute. We all agree with that. We should do more to help in these countries. But the pull factor is America with an irresponsible policy that tells these coyotes that they can, with credibility, the human smugglers, go to these families and say, give me $10,000 and I'll get your kid into Cincinnati, Ohio, or Charleston, West Virginia, or Fargo, North Dakota. And they can say that with credibility because of the way our asylum policy is working and the lack of Title 42. So before you revoke Title 42, please, I urge the administration, have a policy in place that's responsible to deal with the influx, to be sure that the asylum policy is not exploited as it is now. Only 15% of these people coming, as you know, from Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador, in the end, are given asylum because they don't qualify, because they're economic refugees. We all understand why they go. We'd probably do the same thing. It doesn't mean it's right to have a policy that invites people to our border and all of the trauma and the danger of that trip north. So I hope this press conference is helpful, at least in ringing the bell and saying, expect it to happen again unless you put in place responsible policies.